Hello and welcome to a short talk about Aldous Huxley's novel that we read for this week, Brave New World. I'm entitling it Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, The Years of Our Ford and of Our Freud. I'm going to be talking about the contemporary scene of Aldous Huxley and his world, a bit about the importance of mass production and mass consumption in the world of Brave New World and in our world also. And since Henry Ford's name is swapped out with Sigmund Freud's name early in the novel when they were talking about conditioning, I think it's appropriate to speak a little bit as to how Freud's ideas are within the foundation of the writing of this novel. I'm going to speak of some textual features of the novel, and then we'll look at two areas of Brave New World, the Malpais and the London area, and conclude by showing how some of the technology that Huxley is talking about actually is the dialogue continues further. Okay, so Aldous Huxley was one of the famous grandsons of Thomas Henry Huxley, called Darwin's bulldog, famous for the debate with Bishop Wilberforce. And this discussion occurred at the last quarter of the previous of the 19th century, and it was basically Thomas Henry Huxley defending Charles Darwin's idea of evolution. Of course, in the United States, because it's a more conservative society generally, we had this argument with the Scopes monkey trials in 1920, but it was the same basic argument. And Thomas Henry Huxley coming down on the side of science, and Aldous Huxley certainly being quite comfortable talking about science as well, because it goes in the family. His brother was a famous biologist and also a popular science writer. His name was Julian Huxley, and one of his collections of essays, called New Bottles for New Wine, that came out in 1957, contains the first use of the term transhumanism. So both of these brothers very future-looking, but as I'll mention in the last point of on this slide, Aldous Huxley was a bit more spiritually orientated. Now, he was introduced to botany by his father, which should come as no surprise because they're a family of biologists after all. He had a stint as a French teacher and worked in a chemical plant after college. So some of the techniques of the hatchery, he may have observed something similar there. But oddly enough, he was also a member of a group of people called the Bloomsbury Set. They were very influential British authors, and I'm sure you've heard of Virginia Woolf and the economist John Maynard Keynes. They would basically hang out and be intellectuals together. Huxley has more or less always been a satirist, and he did write some social satires also about the Bloomsbury Set, if one reads it the right way, before he comes out with Brave New World. But Brave New World was his big breakthrough in 1932. It is a bookend as a dystopia for a utopian work, Island, that came out 30 years later. And this was sort of anticipated by Bernard Marx and Helmholtz Watson being forced into exile on an island within the novel Brave New World. he moved to America in 1937, moved to Los Angeles, and um, became spiritually inclined, um, largely through an interest in religion and hallucinogenic substances. The Doors of Perception, um, which the rock band The Doors took their name from, shows his concerns with psilocybin mushrooms. I'm sure he did some field work before he wrote that book. And Heaven and Hell focuses on the spiritual qualities of art, but also of religion. Um, Going rapidly on to the year of our Ford, what we know, some of you may even drive a Ford Focus for all I know. But the Model T was the first mass-produced automobile that employed an assembly line. And it started in 1908 and had a 20-year run. You will note that the Christian cross in Brave New World has the top cut off of it, so that the cross is actually a T. Now, the Model T was the first globally produced high-end consumer product, with factories producing the same models in several countries, including Europe, the United Kingdom, and Canada. Um, in his American plant in Detroit, he paid his workers over twice what other assembly line workers were making, and this upset his competition considerably, but he did it in order to create customers for his cars and also to ensure that he had top quality workers. In 1925, he actually set up his own private tutoring school for people that worked for him, called the Henry Ford English School. But in addition to helping people with language skills, it also taught them basic hygiene, some information, I believe, about diet. But not a, maybe we won't call him exactly a philanthropist, but he did want his workers to thrive. As a master of monopoly capital, he controlled the entire supply chain for the automobile, from mining the coal to mining the iron ore to make the steel, to the transportation, to the assembly line. And in the Detroit plant, a new Model T was being created every 3 minutes while the plant was open. The year of our Ford is also the year of our Freud, and much of Aldous Huxley's thinking could not help but be informed by a book that was translated, I think, in 1930, called Civilization and Its Discontents. If we take the presuppositions of Freud, the individual's non-physical body, so their psychic state, their conscious, their intellectual state, and conscious and subconscious, is divided into the id, and that would be our basic animal needs, the sex drive, hunger, some flight or fight reactions. The ego, that's the individual that gets so much focus with Bernard Marx, Helmholtz Watson, and even John the Savage. And that ego is in distinction to the collective, or what society expects of us, and this is referred to as the super ego. And the individual person is negotiating between all three of these levels. He had an unusual take on the dynamics of the family. In Vienna, he was dealing with family problems or people who were in problematic families, and he comes up with this notion of the Oedipus complex, that what males really want to do is kill their father and sleep with their mother. Hmm. Um, I'm not so sure of the psychological validity about that. It's been said that his entire practice, Freud never cured anybody, but because he used his examples from literature, and if you read the essay on the uncanny that I provided for you in an addendum down below in an extra module, you'll see that he uses a lot of literary examples and makes very, very strong claims for literature actually being a primary experience, not a secondary experience. Having said that, civilization and its discontents sets up many of the problems that are answered by the world that is presented in the novel Brave New World. One is the tension between the individual and the collective. Another is the eros and thanatos, the drive to reproduce, and at the same time containing something within us called the death wish, and then our difficulties of imposing adequate restrictions via the superego, like the Christian command to love your neighbor as yourself. Within Brave New World, all three of these create different elements, but the solution that is offered is a variety of crude genetic manipulation in vitro. Bottle babies where they can make menial laborers happy to be menial laborers, like they can make intellectual workers happy to be intellectual workers. And this is done by, as I said, a crude form of genetic manipulation, the Buchanowski process, but mostly by operant conditioning and sleep learning, which is a type of hypnotic suggestion where the message is repeated many, many times and it's brought on board. It's interesting that Bernard Marx, who is himself everyone admits, a very capable psychologist in this department that controls this psychological conditioning, it seems to me that he is almost using his knowledge of the conditioning to fight his own conditioning. Now, of course, people say that someone accidentally squirted alcohol in his bottle when he was a bottle baby. But having said that, it's almost poetically ironic that it's Bernard Marx who has a difficulty coming to terms with his own conditioning. Okay. I cannot avoid briefly discussing the literary elements. A couple of things that do not appear anywhere on the planche, but which fascinate me. Helmholtz Watson and Bernard Marx are both basically striving to be individuals, but Bernard more in a he wishes to be alone, whereas Helmholtz Watson is having his difficulty with the conditioning is that he is a creative artist. and he feels something within him that is trying to get out, and the restrictions of his job, and he does teach people how to write propaganda. That's his job, and he's very good at it. But the restrictions of his job and the restrictions of the brave new world that he lives in um, uh, uh, does not facilitate, and in fact makes it criminal for him to express himself poetically, as he does in one lecture, and promptly ends up losing his job, and eventually he's sent away to the Falkland Islands. So in terms of characters, these I won't even say these figures are tragic, but they are suffering. They are suffering in the world that they live in. And then there's this weird woman, Lenina. Now, Lenina likes Bernard, and Lenina likes John the Savage. And both of those guys are pretty, well, they're kind of prudish in a way, old-fashioned. And so you have to wonder that maybe something went wrong with Lenina's conditioning as well, that she goes for these old-fashioned men. Now, of course, John the Savage has a great physique. He's hot. He's got nice sandy hair, etc. But still, she does find certain things cute with Bernard as well. Okay, that was just my discussion of the characters, which I did not include in the PowerPoint presentation. Textual features of the novel. First of all, this novel is densely didactic because the world is so strange for the day. Much effort has to be spent showing the reader how things function. And this goes from everything to birth at the hatchery, to death when the smoke from the body is squirted out into the atmosphere, but the phosphorus is retained. Everything has to be explained, and that kind of showing and explaining is called, it makes it a didactic novel. And didactic novels are difficult to write, they're difficult to read, and particularly difficult to write, to quote Helmholtz Watson, like one is pierced. And I would say, as a work of literature, in my own opinion, Brave New World is not the most riveting work of literature, although it is a ripping, interesting cultural artifact from the 1930s. Nevertheless, Huxley's contact with the Bloomsbury group may have inspired him to try his hand at literary flourishes. In other words, this guy is trying to write a literary novel in some respects. And in particular, chapter 3, which has like 3 different or 4 different conversations going on and being interspliced, this is a modernist technique, and when you read it, you're actually forced to kind of identify what conversation the different sections pertain to. This is a definite modernist technique. If, however, you listen to Stephen Parker's radio play or audiobook with the sound effects, it becomes very easy to determine which conversations are which, and flows a little bit better in the brain. Although the listener still has to be involved in her interpretation of what she's listening to. The title of the work is itself a literary allusion from Shakespeare's fantastical comedy, The Tempest, the play that appears first in first folio, the first collected works of William Shakespeare's plays. There was an attempt made to actually make a feature-length movie out of it. I think Ben Kingsley might have been in it, but for some reason they never managed to finish it. And I can understand why. It's a story of political intrigue. People are marooned on an island, just like Helmholtz Watson and Bernard Marx are at the end, and they do meet creatures there who have been tamed by people who had been sent to the island before. Ironically, except for one aside by Mustafa Mond, all the direct Shakespeare quotations are actually from the Savage, John. This is because he used this book to teach himself English, and his speech is to be understood as being somewhat Shakespearean, although not really. It comes out a little bit awkward, actually. Plays that I recognize just off the top of my head are The Tempest, Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, Othello. Macbeth is the part with tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and a tale told by an idiot. Hamlet is channeled very strongly when Pope is coming to Linda's bed and getting her drunk and fornicating with her, and he wants to kill Pope, and that's, killing the man who displaces your father is a big part of Hamlet as well. Romeo and Juliet and Othello are there, believe it or not, mostly for their aesthetic qualities, although Othello is used to recognize that, yes, John knows what a Negro is, he knows what a black man is. And Romeo and Juliet, the passages that they have there are just, they're beautiful. It was him thinking about, it was John the Savage thinking about Lenina. And I assure you that anybody who would buy this book in 1932 would be all too familiar with these works of literature. Alrighty, as we are rounding out and getting close to a conclusion here, I've included two spaces, if you will, London or England of Brave New World and Malpais in New Mexico. Now, London is London, and John, of course, ends up at a lighthouse on the coast, but it's England nonetheless. But Malpais means bad country, if we're translating the Spanish. Okay, let's start with life in London. One is hatched out of a bottle, and in Malpais, community of, they think, maybe 50,000. They have good old-fashioned live childbirth. In London, in the world of Brave New World, people are genetically programmed to be happy with a lot that they are given, whereas in Malpais, people are they just come out the way they are, and their conditioning is, well, I'm not going to say it's ineffective. It's just not scientific. It's more spiritually orientated. And that's when Matsui, or whatever that guy's name is, when John was 15, he taught him how to work with pottery, and John went up into the mountain by himself and went without food and sleep for 5 days to discover what his spirit animal was, and so forth. So there is certainly conditioning going on in a traditional society, but not with the techniques that we see in Brave New World. Brave New World is atheistic in terms of a godhead. However, it is not without a religion. And the religion of Brave New World is Freudism, the technology of the day. Although it's not exactly like the technophiliac society that we're in, and pay close attention to the long speech by, excuse me, Mustafa Mond at the chapter 17, I think it was, might have been 16, but anyway, toward the end of the book, when he is speaking in great detail as how we can't allow free scientific innovation. So remember, this was something that almost cost Mustafa Mond his job and almost got him sent to the island, to an island, because he is by nature a scientist. So while it is technophilic with the technology that they have, people love this technology. They can't imagine anything else. You know, they're doped into oblivion. They got a nice, easy life. All their health needs are taken care of. Nonetheless, there is something that functions as a godhead here, as a, if you will, as a carrier, as an external vessel of right and wrong. Whereas in Malpais, that external vessel of right and wrong is a mixture of Christianity and nature spirits. Both of them, in their way, do get the job done. One of the sleep learning hypnotism phrases that people are subjected to in Brave New World is everyone belongs to everybody else, and this is kind of underwriting a notion of sexual promiscuity. Whereas in Malpais, they're nominally monogamous, and at the very least, promiscuity in women are not appreciated, frowned on, and punished. And this is how Linda gets into trouble right away. She doesn't understand this at first, and she accommodates an awful lot of Braves. In Brave New World, you work your 7.5 hours, and then you have some sports, and then you have some entertainment, and basically every moment is accounted for. And if you want to check out, you just take some soma, you just take some big old dose of MDMA or whatever the analog was that Huxley was operating with, and you can get happy, or you can get to the space where time itself stops, a so-called lunar 3-day vacation, which for some reason in real life lasts 18 hours. Whereas in Malpais, one does have to strive to earn one's living. Food comes from the soil. And it is such a brutally hard soil that one of the reasons that Malpais was not developed is because it could never have been made profitable to do so, which I thought was kind of a strange justification, but nonetheless that is the reason given didactically within the book. An individual in England, a Brave New World, would be clean and sweetly groomed. There is a comic scene where while Bernard is in Malpais with Lenina, he suddenly remembers that he left a tap of cologne running in his apartment. He gets Helmholtz to go over and turn it off. So, he puts on nice smelling stuff. Lenina very often is putting on powder. Her nose is a little shiny. It's all good smelling, etc. Not so in Malpais, where people smell like people. In Brave New World, individual initiative is discouraged and indeed punished, whereas in Malpais, individual initiative and responsibility is rewarded to the level that John the Savage is upset that he is not given the ability to show what he can do in terms of personal trials. And finally, there is no room for guilt in Brave New World. A gram is better than a dam, you know. 3 half-gram tablets will get away, will erase all your bad thoughts. Whereas in Malpais, even when you try to anesthetize yourself with alcohol, you're going to have a nasty hangover the following day. I love that Norwegian expression, fylle nerver. So yeah, there's guilt that way, but there's also guilt to keep people in line. Okay, by way of a quick conclusion, uh, is the transhuman world of Brave New World, was it a strong enough warning? Was it meant as a warning? Well, we can discuss that. But we have today already, as you guys pointed out in your reports last week, the possibility for designer humans. We do use behavioral conditioning like mad. We have since the 1920s. And some would claim we have the illusion of will, but we don't really have free will. That's the current take of science today. Huxley's spiritual side is tempered by his role as a constant reminder of the dangers that humankind is running with its reliance upon technology, propaganda, and social engineering. And I think that it's easy for us to forget just how fragile these elements that we use as guidelines to control our life really can be. In some of the editions of Brave New World that you have bought, it's actually got a thin book at the end called Brave New World Revisited, which came out some years later, 25 years later, also written by Aldous Huxley. And in 1957, he already catalogs what elements from Brave New World are becoming more and more accepted. And in an interview, he actually said, and in the book, but in an interview, he said that what surprised him is that we are becoming like Brave New World much faster than even he imagined. And this idea of creating a world that is comfortable for us, or acknowledging what really controls us, and using it as an alibi to help make us happy. This continues. B.F. Skinner's Walden 2 came out right after the Second World War, and of course Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene, which if you know Richard Dawkins primarily from his atheism writing, I would urge you to investigate The Selfish Gene, or the sequel to that called The Extended Phenotype. Really insightful works, really interesting works, I think. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your kind attention. This lecture will be supplemented by an interview with a Huxley scholar, also a technology scholar, Karar Almafrage, which will be appearing right below this lecture in the module. Again, I thank you for your attention. Bye for now.